Joe Burrow was the man at LSU, and he is now the man in Cincinnati. Every step of his career so far has been a success story of the highest order, transforming struggling teams into powerhouses and racking up jaw-dropping numbers in the process. Whilst the Bengals seem determined to waste his pro career at the moment, the former Tigers' resume has special written all over it. From high school success and the greatest college season of all time to breaking records in the NFL, this is how good Joe Burrow is, actually. Joe Burrow's journey to NFL stardom began in Ames, Iowa, where he was born to Robin and Jim Burrow. Whether he liked it or not, sport was going to be a big part of Joe's life, with members of his family racking up impressive numbers across different generations. This started with his grandmother setting a Mississippi State high school record of 82 points in a basketball game back in the 1940s, and continued with his grandfather, uncle, and older brothers all playing at the collegiate level on basketball or football teams. His father got in on the action as well, playing in the defensive backfield for Nebraska, which led to him being drafted by the Green Bay Packers. Whilst that only led to one season in the NFL, Jim did go on to enjoy 5 seasons in the Canadian League, which produced 2 All-Star selections before he transitioned into coaching. This career move by Jim was great news for his sons, because what budding sports star doesn't want a coach in the family? With his dad taking a role at Ohio University, Burrow started his football journey at Athens High School. This was a school that had had very little to cheer for, but that all changed when Burrow arrived, as he led the school to 3 straight playoff appearances, treating the locals to the school's first 7 playoff victories in their history. His stellar high school career produced 11,416 yards and 157 touchdowns over the years, along with another 2,067 yards and 27 touchdowns on the ground. The best came in his senior season, for which he was named the Gatorade Player of the Year and Ohio's Mr. Football. He was a proven winner, had stats for days, and even managed to be named a first-team All-State point guard on the basketball court as well. There was nothing he couldn't do, and his reward was a 4-star recruitment rating, placing him as the 8th best dual-threat quarterback in the class of 2015. The offers from college programs came thick and fast, but when the nearby Ohio State Buckeyes came calling, Burrow couldn't exactly say no. Unfortunately, any momentum he carried from his high school career was dented early. He redshirted the 2015 campaign and then could not convince the coaching staff to promote him above the incumbent starter JT Barrett in either 2016 or 2017. He finally got a chance to properly compete for the starting role prior to the 2018 season, but ended up getting beaten out by Dwayne Haskins, who had arrived at Ohio State 1 year after Joe. Not happy at the prospect of spending another year on the bench, Burrow backed himself and transferred to LSU, where another quarterback competition was waiting for him. This time he won, beating Miles Brennan to the job. Finally, after 3 years on the sideline, Joe Burrow was about to start a season as QB1. It quickly became apparent that LSU had found a good one, with Burrow flexing his muscles in his 5th game against Ole Miss, completing 72% of his passes for 292 yards and 3 touchdowns in a 45-16 victory. It wasn't just his arm that made the performance special though, with him also taking 9 carries for a further 96 yards and 1 more score on the ground. Burrow ended the season with a solid 2,894 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions, adding 399 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. That 2019 campaign kicked off with a 5-touchdown performance against Georgia Southern, in which Burrow completed 85.2% of his passes. 4 more touchdowns then came 1 week later in a sensational 471-yard outing against Texas, in which the Tigers prevailed by 45 points to 38. With wide receivers Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase now hitting their stride in their second seasons, the Tigers went ballistic, averaging an outrageous 47.2 points per game. They swept aside anybody who got in their way, leading to a perfect 13-0 regular season record, which was highlighted by a 46-point outing against Nick Saban's Alabama. Across that incredible unbeaten regular season, Burrow completed 77.9% of his passes for 4,715 yards, 48 touchdowns, and just 6 interceptions. In doing so, he helped each of his top receivers, Chase and Jefferson, post over 1,500 yards and 18 touchdowns each, setting them up for first-round draft selections after just 2 years in college. It wasn't just other people's draft stock that he was boosting though, with Burrow's own reputation also soaring. To the surprise of absolutely no one, Joe Burrow was awarded the 2019 Heisman Trophy, winning it with the largest margin of victory in college football history. He, of course, also won pretty much every other award going, and was named a consensus All-American, but there were more pressing things on his mind. Burrow swiftly forgot about his individual accolades, attacking the college football playoffs in style. He landed 493 yards and 7 touchdowns on the Oklahoma Sooners in the semifinal, setting up a national championship date with Trevor Lawrence's Clemson Tigers. On the biggest of stages, Joe Burrow remained as hot as ever, completing 63% of his passes for 463 yards and 5 touchdowns, whilst also adding 58 yards and 1 more score on the ground. His Tigers enjoyed a 42-25 victory that made them national champions, wrapping up one of the greatest football seasons of all time. There was literally nothing left for Joe Burrow to prove at the collegiate level. He had broken the LSU school record for yards with 2 games still remaining in the regular season, and he had somehow managed to elevate his game further under the pressure of playoff football. His insane production in the postseason took his tally to 5,671 yards, 60 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, with 368 yards and 5 more touchdowns coming on the ground. With all of that production under his belt, it was now time for Joe to test his talents against the pros, heading into the 2020 NFL Draft as the consensus #1 quarterback option. Despite him having just executed arguably the greatest season of all time by a college quarterback, Joe Burrow still faced some criticism entering the 2020 draft. There was little doubt that he would go with the first overall pick to the Cincinnati Bengals, but some analysts were concerned by his moderate arm strength, theorizing that he may not be able to make all the throws in the book. Burrow was used to being doubted though, and having already proved why Ohio State made a mistake by leaving him on the bench for so long during his time at college, he now set out to vindicate Cincinnati's decision in the NFL. The Bengals were fresh off an embarrassing 2-win season in 2019 and were in desperate need of a savior. Thankfully for Bengals fans, Joe Burrow appeared to be exactly that in just his second game, setting a new NFL rookie record with 37 completions for 316 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Cleveland Browns. He then set another record against them later that season by becoming the first rookie in NFL history with at least 400 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown in a single game. It was clear that Joe Burrow's talents would absolutely hold up against the tougher opposition. It was a spectacular start by Burrow, and one that would have surely led to him winning the Offensive Rookie of the Year award. But instead, it ended in disaster, with him tearing his ACL and MCL against Washington in Week 11. This was not your typical injury, and with it came a fresh wave of doubts and questions. Could Joe Burrow, who was already below average from an athletic standpoint, return and deliver at a level worthy of the first overall pick? Similarly, with him having produced just 2 victories from 10 games he played as a rookie, some analysts were querying whether he had what it takes to win in the NFL. Well, 1 year later, it took no time at all for him to start putting some of those concerns to rest. He made a remarkable recovery from his gruesome injury to return to the lineup in time for the season opener, where he kicked things off with an overtime victory against the Minnesota Vikings, laying the foundations for an impressive sophomore season that saw him rack up 4,611 yards, 34 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. The most impressive part of the season, though, was how he finished it, responding to a midseason wobble by the Bengals to win 2 high-pressure games against Baltimore and Kansas City in Weeks 16 and 17 to secure a playoff berth. In both games, Burrow threw for at least 440 yards and 4 touchdowns, confirming his status among the league's elite quarterbacks in just his second season. He then made his case for potentially being the very best signal caller in the NFL by leading the Bengals through the playoffs and defeating a daunting Kansas City side in the AFC Championship game. During this postseason stretch, Burrow made himself an instant club legend, winning the Bengals their first playoff game in 31 years and their first ever playoff game on the road. Unfortunately, there would be no fairy tale ending to his sophomore season, with the Rams just about edging a 23-20 victory to win the Lombardi Trophy. Watching the confetti fall on your opponents is never going to be easy, but Burrow could at least take pride in the fact that he had established himself as one of the league's best quarterbacks, winning the NFL Comeback Player of the Year award in the process. Just as he had done at high school and college, Joe Burrow had transformed a struggling team and made them a powerhouse. Now, with all that experience and production under his belt, surely the biggest prize in football, a Super Bowl, was not far away. Well, not quite. 1 year later, in 2022, Joe Burrow won his first Pro Bowl nod, thanks to a 4,475-yard, 35 touchdown, and 12 interception season. His team once again raced through the playoffs, but this time they would be defeated by the Kansas City Chiefs, with an agonizing unnecessary roughness penalty, gifting the Chiefs the extra yardage they needed to set up the game-winning field goal. 2 consecutive seasons of crushing losses are always going to take their toll on a team, but Joe Burrow would at least be entering the 2023 season with a shiny new contract that made him the highest paid player in NFL history, earning $275 million over the next 5 years. It was a well-deserved deal that confirmed Burrow as the franchise's savior, but he would unfortunately get no opportunity to repay their faith in 2023. After a frustrating start to the season, in which the Bengals lost 3 of their first 4 games, Burrow suffered his second season-ending injury in just 4 years, tearing a ligament in his wrist in Week 11. The frustration of 2023 was then compounded by an even more disappointing start to 2024. The preseason was overshadowed by contract disputes with star wide receiver Jamar Chase and star edge defender Trey Hendrickson, and the mood descended further when the team lost 4 of their first 5 games. This was now the second year in a row that the Bengals had piled on the pressure early in the season and given themselves a much harder battle to reach the playoffs. This time around though, in 2024, the offense could not be blamed. After 12 weeks of the season, Joe Burrow is leading the league in passing yards and would be a genuine MVP favorite if his team had a better record. Instead, he's being let down by a defense that is giving up the 28th most points in the league with 26.9 per game. That is simply not going to get the job done, wasting a truly elite season from their quarterback. Unfortunately, the Bengals ownership have a proven track record of not wanting to spend big on their own players. In the 2023 offseason, they chose to let safety Jesse Bates leave, and now he is having a fantastic season in Atlanta, whilst the Bengals defense continues to struggle. The next star player who looks set to be on their way out is T. Higgins, who is undoubtedly going to ask for big money, but who has been an essential part of this offense since he was drafted in 2020. The offense is notably worse when he's not on the field, yet all signs point towards him being allowed to walk after the 2024 season. With Higgins heading for the door and the defense struggling so mightily, it's hard to see the Bengals making a significant charge for the Lombardi Trophy in 2025. Joe Burrow said that the team's Super Bowl window was his entire career at the conclusion of the 2022 season, but as things stand, just 2 years later, are the Cincinnati Bengals wasting his prime years? Let me know what you think in the comments.